First thing that Jesus ever says about money. You ready for it? It's this right here. Give to the one who begs from you, and do not refuse the one who would borrow from you. Okay, so everybody turn to your neighbor right now and say, hey, can I borrow $1,000? Anybody, like... Let me ask you this. How many of you have Matthew chapter 5, verse 42 as your life verse? Anybody have this as your life verse? Anybody? What you're going to find is that no one has this verse memorized, I'm guessing. No one in the world has this as their life verse. None of you have this verse painted on the wall of your house. I've never seen this verse at Hobby Lobby in my entire life. And what you're going to find is that none of us, not one of us, takes this verse literally. Do you know why? Because we think to ourselves, whoa, Jesus, are you telling me that every time I drive off the highway that I'm supposed to roll down my window and give to anyone who asks? Like, are you telling me that every time I go to downtown LA, that as a follower of Jesus Christ, that I'm supposed to play Santa Claus every time I go down there? Because here's the idea in our head, that if I give to anyone that asks me for money, you know what's going to happen, Jesus? I'm going to get played. You know, and because you and I make so much more sense than Jesus, we think to ourselves, hey, that here's what we really need to do. We really need to kind of move on to another verse that makes more sense. And you and I have a problem with other people who do that. You know, they pick and choose what verses they want to follow and what they don't want to follow. We have a problem with other people who do that. For some reason, we just don't have a problem when we do that. And we think to ourselves with this verse that really what we need to do is we need to kind of move on. We need to move on to something that makes a little bit more sense. We need to move on to something that's going to make me feel a little bit better about myself. But really what we need to do is when you don't understand a verse of the Bible, here's what we got to do. We got to do this right here. When something sounds crazy in the Bible, don't overlook it. Be slow to understand it. He's not saying that every time a homeless person asks me for money that I'm going to give them money. He's not necessarily saying that any time anybody ever wants to borrow from me that I have to let them borrow from me. I think he's just making this point right here. I think he's just saying that it's time for us as Christians to just change our default position. It's time for us to change our default position. Yeah, you don't have to give to everyone who asks you, but wouldn't you want to? I think maybe is what he's saying. God is saying, I know that you have rights. That you have a right to hold on to all of your money. You're the one who worked for it. That you have the right to get the biggest TV that you possibly can. You have a right to drive the nicest car that you can. You have the right to build the biggest barns that you can. He's saying, I just got a little bit something that I want you to think about, though. That in the process of defending your rights and defending what's yours, be careful, be careful. Because you may end up gaining the whole world. But you may end up losing something so much greater in the process.